Good evening. It is Wednesday, June 28th at 5:01. This is the Learning and Teaching Committee meeting. We have our agenda and we're ready to get started. Board members are still arriving, but I believe everyone will be here. Do we have any citizens' comments? No citizens' comments. So we're going to go to our discussion tonight. We have 3 items for discussion: the strategic plan, ALOP, Compass, and Proficiency Scales. Tonight, what we are doing is bringing back to the committee the strategic plan and ALOP and Compass for further discussion. If there are more questions or comments or thoughts, we're not going to go through the entire presentation that the board had at its board meeting on June 12th. However, we will cover areas that board members did request more information. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gordon and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Board, appreciate the time to go through our strategic plan first. We'll pull up as Ms. McCabe said, a very brief PowerPoint and getting to those 5 overarching questions that were at the June 12th meeting, and then be able to answer any other questions that the board may have. Let's see if the mighty clicker will work. Perfect. You know our district commitment, together building pathways to excellence. The core values that started with the board: belonging, perseverance, and achievement. Into our strategic priorities: effective collaboration, instructional coherence, culture of dignity, with the outcomes, 3 outcomes under each strategic priority. The success indicators that you see there, really leaning in to the ABCs, the research that stands strongly and firmly behind the success indicators that we've selected at all different grade levels, so that each student from our EC through our transition program, our students are seen within our success indicators. And again, as an overview for success indicators, it is about the overall health of the organization is really where success indicators come into. So the board had a number of questions at our last board meeting. One of them really focused around the strategic priority of culture of dignity, and really around this question: how will we operationalize the strategic outcomes to attract, develop, and retain effective, caring, and culturally competent staff? We talked about this aspect here: the culturally competent educators create inclusive learning environments and utilize asset-based instructional practices that ensure access and participation in meaningful ways. And this is steeped in research as well. And it's how will we evaluate and hire for that cultural competency? And for us, it really falls within that high quality instruction. We see that through all of the work that we do with our staff. It also lives and breathes. I put this on your table as well. This is directly from the Danielson framework for that the educators are evaluated off of. And this is 2A. So there are 4 competency areas, and this is 2A. And you can see over in distinguished, that's where we, on any rubric, that's where we really want to live. And you can see that cultural competency really woven through all of this work here, that we're really assessing our educators on a regular basis. So it does live and breathe here. And that's when we're looking to evaluate it. This is those aspects that Mr. Lentz was asking about. How do you measure this work? Well, we literally measure it on an ongoing basis amongst our educators, our teaching staff, our school leaders, and others. So it's integral into what we do and how we do our work on a day-to-day basis. The other piece that I want to be clear here, this is under the culture of dignity, under the hiring retaining, attracting. It's not about creating quotas for certain demographics of staff members. What we want in D303 is highly competent staff members with a diverse range of skills to meet the diverse needs of our students on a day-to-day basis. That's what we're hiring for. But I'll be clear to the board, our community, this is not about a quota. That's not what this has ever been about. We've had really good conversations within the equity group. I mean, we're talking months ago. Mr. Lackner, Mrs. McKay were in those conversations, and really where we were trying to get to is making sure that we have a really diverse staff of diverse skills, of diverse backgrounds, all for the purpose of working with our kids and improving the outcomes for our kids. That's really where we're at in this area of that conversation. One of those, I'm clicking my computer and not this. How will it be evaluated on a higher level? We know when kids are seen, valued, and heard in every category of our success indicators. We will see growth in students when our students feel that, when our staff brings that to the table that you see in 2A. It absolutely has an impact on our kids' lives. When our staff bring that level of attention and care to our students, we know the attendance and belonging go through the roof. When I know my teacher cares for me and is there for me and sees me for who the person I am, my belonging data is also going to go up. Discipline referrals go down. Grade work continues to improve. So we see it as connecting to each and every one of our success indicators. You know, why were these success indicators chosen and how did they connect to the board and district goals? This was a great question that was asked as well. You've seen the research. I think I've maybe knocked you all over the head with the amount of research on the ABCs. It is significant. We have a board report that will be available to the public here tomorrow morning, but the board's seen it. We're talking pages and pages of research around attendance, behavior, content, the type of courses our kids take really does matter. Rigorous course selection matters. The B, I know that's been talked about, debated at the strategic plan team. It's debated here. It's been pushed on our surveys quite a bit. But at the end of the day, we have to really, for me, I really want to lean into the research, and the research continues to tell us when students in middle school are attaining B in all their course content areas, they're much more prepared for high school. And when our students are attaining Bs and higher in high school, it's a better indicator. And research after research, and it's on there, indicates it's a better indicator than even your SATs. So why wouldn't we? I know there's a whole conversation about grade inflation and this and that, but I have a firm belief in our educators. They're evaluating our students at the best level possible. That's another piece that Dr. Igo and others are working for with our scale scores around our priority standards. So we're working hard there as well to create even greater consistency throughout D303. And we've talked for months and months and months around having consistent rigor applied throughout our organization. That's one of the big pieces we're looking at. But it's also aligns to making sure that we're assessing students on a rigorous, consistent way. And that's what those scale scores will do for us as well. That, interestingly enough, will be on the committee agenda a little bit later on that Dr. Eigel will speak about. The other piece that I want to make sure that we really connect with were all the success indicators, the prior goals and the benchmarks of the district in our monthly data dashboard. Boy, if you look at those, you see a direct representation of what the district had been monitoring and where the district's going with the success indicators. I mean, it's almost a 1-for-1. In the goals and benchmarks, we also had B average in there. We had grade level IAR data. We have all of those pieces, and same in the data dashboard. We have the attendance. So we knew the really important things. The success indicators for me is one way to collapse it all into one overarching, how's the health of our organization and where are we going as an organization? But I'm really pleased that it bridges the benchmark on tracked indicators and our monthly data dashboard. I think it does a really nice job there as well, while leaning deeply into the research that supports the work that we're doing there. Mr. Kuchar?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in with a quick question, and I'm sorry if we
No, you're
missed
good.
this over multiple discussions. Can you remind me what constitutes a B average? Is that a 5-point scale? Is that a 4-point scale? How
And
are we weighting that? How does that work?
So I'm going to reach out to Christine to give you the full answer on that one.
Yeah, so we do have a 5-point, we use a 5-point scale, so it would be a 4.0. But we felt like we worded it as the way of a
Yeah.
B average, so that we were communicating what we were hoping for, is that the student has a B or better average, right, which is a 4.0 on our scale. But at the middle school, we don't necessarily do GPA, so there we're pulling based on Bs.
Thank you.
Just related to
Please.
that, so obviously over time, we'll see like somewhat of a normal distribution with grades, right? We see that
Yeah.
proverbial bell curve, right? So how are we going to combat that when a certain percentage of students are going to fall in a C range or a B range, or on average in an A range? We have pretty ambitious goals with going above that B average. So how do we do that? How do we kind of push back against what usually we see with normal distribution in grades?
I think what changes the conversation is that we're moving away from moving into a standards-based approach. So we're not talking necessarily about we're going to be looking at, has the student made progress towards or is mastering the priority standards that we've talked about. And so it doesn't mean there aren't going to be students who don't struggle, but what it does allow us to do is be really clear about what does it look like when students are able to demonstrate proficiency, and if they're not, what and how are we responding to that process?
And that responding when a student isn't at grade level, I think that's the piece we have greater clarity about, as opposed to Paul struggling with reading. We're going to be more specific about the standard in which Paul is struggling on and intervene sooner and make sure that it's more of a scalpel approach, that we're very intentional about the why and the what and the type of intervention we're using to support Paul, so he can be back to as close to grade level as possible. And this goes to another one of the questions that we had around pathways. When we think about pathways, it's not just programs and opportunities, it's pathways to the standard. And I think that's a really different way of thinking about the work we're doing. And it's all based on our priority standards and having consistency across our organization, the scale scores. So again, we're better able to know where kids are potentially having challenges. And on the flip side, knowing where we're really doing exceptionally well and being able to understand that better. And in some cases, why in certain grade levels or schools are we seeing a higher percent of students doing this work, and really leaning into our PLCs to listen and learn from our incredible educators to do that work. So I think you're going to have that natural bell curve, but I think we're going to be more responsive and intentional about how we support our students going forward because of the PLC work layered in with the priority standards, the scale scores, and then next to that is the assessment data. There's a question on that as well. What's the timeline for that assessment data and all those different pieces? And that's a piece that the board will see on a regular basis going forward, where we're talking, you're going to see data on a standard. So in this quarter, and I'm just making this up, in this quarter, you see standard 1B and 3C. And this is how it goes for what you're seeing in first grade across our organization, and having that high level at the board table. So the board's really seeing real-time data that is more impactful than what we see oftentimes is end of the year assessment, the IAR. So you guys get that back in the kids take it in the spring, you guys get it. If the state returns it to us, hopefully October, maybe November.
That's embargoed until November.
Yeah, so it's this, there's not a whole lot you do with that kind of data. The data we're talking about now is super responsive all the way back to your question that I like.
I think it's fair to say we're pushing back against a bell curve. We're saying every kid,
Yeah.
each kid, we're pushing back around the thoughts around that.
That's a lot quicker way of saying it than mine.
I'd like to build on that point.
Please.
When I look at the 1080, we have in the November goals that were adopted, I think a terminal point in 25 of 1275 as a mean score, which I understand is super scored and a whole host of other things, but it suggests an expectation of a mean that moves towards that 1275. When I look at the count under 1080, not knowing the full distribution today, that could be contributory towards achieving that 1275 or not. And so one of the things that I want us to discuss clearly is whether or not these supersede. And I'm uncomfortable with the notion that 1080 would be a mean goal versus the count of students who achieve 1080. And I'd further challenge the administration to really look at the quartiles, or even more finely, the performance variance within those quartiles over time. So once we start looking at that distribution and we say, our mean goal is 1275, I want to see movement in every one of those quartiles in an upward direction. Great if we pull the back half of that curve or that distribution towards 1080. That's fantastic. That'll push the mean up. It's a lot less valuable of a move if other parts of that curve are static or declining. And so when we talk about counts at 1080, that's okay, but we have to look at the detail behind it. And I'm uncomfortable with a shift to a 1080 goal on a count basis versus having the mean as the existing goal. I'm comfortable if they're complementary and we want to work it that way. That's okay with me. But if it's 1080 and the percentage of students that achieve a 1080 is the only SAT goal we look at, then I'm uncomfortable.
And I just want to tag to that to make sure I'm clear. The SAT is a one-time shot. Yes, you get to take it more than once, but we have to go back that it doesn't start in high school. It starts earlier. You can't ask freshmen to be prepared to get a 1275 if they don't have their math together by the time they're in 5th grade.
Well, and just really quick, that leans into the question of what happens to the math in middle school, because we had talked about at one point accelerating that. Go ahead.
Well, and that's my point. So I don't want to spend hours on looking at, the SAT, is 1080 the right number? I want to be sure our kids are prepared so that when they get to high school, they can get to Algebra 2 in time to take the SAT. If that is what we believe is important for all or most kids. So we're back to, I think the question I have to tie to your point is if those benchmarks and goals aren't aligned to what we know we need to be doing, that's our job to keep bringing it up. Should it stop us doing the strategic plan? I hope not. I hope that we can continue to have dialogue about, especially once we get our curriculum going and our teachers ready to teach, we may want to set things much higher because our kids are performing better.
Yeah, I think that's
on that, just kind of on that note, I agree with actually, I kind of agree with both of you, but I don't think that they're mutually exclusive things. You can look at the improvement in those quartiles and not expect that we're going to hit that 1275 tomorrow. But I think we can say to our freshmen, we expect you to do better. We're hoping that you're going to do better than our current juniors who are taking the SAT, and do what we can between now and that time for them to improve. So I think they're not mutually exclusive. And I agree. We shouldn't get bogged down saying 1275, but we also should not say we shouldn't be shooting for it.
I would agree with that.
Well, and Mrs. McCabe, I think the point that you're making is a really important one and a good one. And when we talk about the B average, those students who are highest or most likely to achieve on the other end of the range of the SAT scores are likely already well achieving that number. So the question is, if we take the 1275s and the 1300s and we say, how do we move them to scoring 1500s or 1580s or increase the number of 1600s we get? What does that mean for those kids who are getting straight A's, but they have more that they could be doing because they're not yet fully challenged and yet fully prepared? I think this is some of the point you're talking about, pushing the content complexity down towards the middle school to ensure we have the most prepared people. I think it's the same point. It's the leading indicators need to be addressed if that's the lagging or last measure of success that we get. And so I'm with you on it. I just want to make sure that we say, okay, B average, that's great. But there are other kids who are far surpassing that B average who should be geared up towards a 1350 to a 1600 in terms of their score goal for them as individuals. And we have a lot of high performing students who could be better challenged.
So where are we at in
So-
terms of the math effort in particular? Is that still one of the things that we're working on to shore up, or is that now off the
Math
table?
on the side of the
In middle
curriculum.
school.
Oh, in the middle school.
8th grade algebra?
Yeah, they are definitely working towards the acceleration pathway. Is that what you're asking me? Is we're trying to get more kids into algebra? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
otherwise they're already, just by the nature of the offering.
Agreed. Yeah, but where we're doing that work is at the elementary, right? Because we want to make sure that when the kids come into 6th grade, they're ready to access. But yes, we are working on pulling that up. And like, we've seen some increase in the number of kids who are eligible for accelerated math or advanced math. We'll hit algebra 1 in 8th grade. Let me say it
Yeah.
that way.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I remember at one of our data conversations where we had a higher number of 6th graders this year than in years past who are going to be in that algebra ready category. Because again, don't quote me on the number. I think it was 45% of our students who are algebra ready in that 8th grade. But we already have a larger cohort coming in who's doing exactly what you're asking for. We've got to increase that 45% algebra ready number. Again, don't quote me on the 45%.
So-
That was 2 months ago.
So I guess my follow-up to that then would be, what is the number that we should be shooting for that we think would be one of the levers to pull to increase the SAT scores, and what is the timeline to get there?
I think it's, for me, the number one thing we have to do is have our proficiency scales across the board. We can't have inconsistent rigor applied in our schools and in our grade levels. To me, it's the number one thing that's going to do exactly what the board's asking for. And it has to start where Ms. McCabe stated, that we've got to have it from our EC all the way through our organization. So it feeds the organization. And seeing that complexity of text, seeing the complexity of the rigor that's increasing will allow more and more students to have those algebra courses and achieving higher on SAT or any other pathways they want to go down. So I see it as a system piece that we've got to take care of. But the other piece is ensuring that our curriculums, we've had really good conversations at the board table or committee tables around the curriculum that's coming in. We've heard early on around the work of our elementary math that is really transforming where we're going based off of those 6th grade numbers. We know we're in the right place on that. That keeps going. The work we're doing in literacy with the adoption of the Wonders curriculum and the support of our educators. That's the other mix in here that we can't forget. We have to keep growing we've got to keep growing those big people while we're putting the system in place of rigor, of standards, rigors of curriculum, and continue to grow our teachers at that same time. So I see it from a systems perspective to get us there in a timely manner.
Well, okay, but the proficiencies have to be defined appropriately so that the kids are algebra ready by 8th grade.
Correct.
And so I guess what I'm looking for is, what is the roadmap as far as when When are those proficiencies going to be defined? What's the starting point of that in terms of is it
We got a
fifth
great
grade?
answer for you.
And then, and when are we going to get?
Tonight, Christine is literally bringing
Yes.
for proficiency
Yes.
scales, and the where we're going with this, and because of the timeline in wanting to make sure that we're moving this further, faster forward, is that we've reached out to a leading institute, the Marzano Institute, and really leaning into their work that they've been doing this. I've been around a day or two, way back in Adams 12. We had Dr. Marzano in our school district working with us on scale scores. These have now been worked through countless school districts across the country. They've been vetted. They're good. It's our starting place where we're going with our scale scores. But we really feel like it's important that we have those in place and that our teachers start working with those this year. Christine?
But just to interject
so-
really quick, though, I mean, I appreciate the metric has to be in place, but the content has to be there. So I guess I'm just looking for when are we going to be confident in the content so that they're ready?
I get you.
Yeah, I'm feeling very confident. No, I am confident. We will have that content in place by the end of the school year. Like we will be in a spot. And if it's not in place, I will be able to specifically say it's here, here, and here. And we had to go find this to raise that rigor, because the way we're going to be working is through those priority standards. And we're going to be watching where kids are every 5 days.
Yep.
They're going to be having those conversations. The end of every unit, I'm pulling people together and saying what worked, what didn't, why do we have this many kids not here yet? And what's the problem? And so I'll have a better handle on if I think we have it, but if we don't,
We'll know.
we'll know where it is.
But are the priority standards set at the level to provide the right
Yes.
foundation to be successful in 8th grade for algebra? Right? We can
Yes.
have all kinds of priority standards, but if they do not build for the student to be ready for algebra in 8th grade, it won't matter. You see what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying. I think we won't be ready for that, because I think that's a different conversation. If we're saying we want algebra 1 in 8th grade to be the core, that's a different
Yeah.
conversation than it needs to be advanced. Like it's the number of students that we put into that advanced programming.
I
So
guess I thought we'd been saying that for a while, so.
That every
that's
kid
me.
would be algebra
Not
ready.
there's
Yeah.
never absolutes.
Well, wait,
Yeah.
So
Right, but
72%.
that was gonna be the path, and that's what we were leading to, was that our majority algebra would be the core.
the majority,
Yes.
I feel like we will have the majority
Yes.
of kids as algebra for the core. I think that I don't know that we want to put that to be the core, that algebra 1 is the core for everyone. Just with the change in the standards. There was a lot of research that used to say that used to be where we needed to be, but all that research was pre-Common Core. And we started to dig into that. The way they redid the Common Core standards, a lot of what kids needed is now in 8th grade math. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't push more kids in. So
Because the reality is, they won't be ready to be fully successful as they could be in the SAT if they have not had algebra 2 before they take their SAT,
right.
their junior year. They
So you
won't.
want to. Okay,
Yeah,
but I mean, they'll be through April, right? Like when they take the assessment.
we know that their kid. Mrs. Fairgrieve and I are on the same page with this.
Okay.
It's not gonna, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't change the strategic
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. The conversation that I've wanted to have is how can we make algebra the core?
Okay.
Not all children will make it, so we have to be sure we have it for 9th graders as well. Not all kids want to take the SAT. Not all, that is not going to be their goal. Their goals are other things. We get that. But the more algebra is that gatekeeper for so many things.
Yeah. So I would love if we could put this on the agenda, maybe for August. I'd like the August or September. Like I want to make sure I have enough time to think through. So I can bring through, here's how we would do that. Here's the research behind why, like how and why we would, I just want to make sure that our decisions are based in the evidence to get us where we want to be.
I would challenge if we can find a spot in August. I think that would be great. And I would encourage, and if any other board members disagree, but I'm a little bit struggling because this is the course we've been on as a board for a while.
I would agree, but I didn't understand that. I'll own that I didn't understand. I thought my goal was to get as many kids as possible into Algebra 1. I didn't understand I was to change the core curriculum to Algebra 1.
Keep going to get as many kids
Yeah.
into Algebra 1. And then let's have the discussion because this, to me, it's a rigor thing. To me, it's understanding numeracy that starts way back. And if it can happen, we open up some doors for kids who may not have. And when we, you're bringing the AP stuff to us in July, we're going to learn a lot through that as well. So if we can think about it, I know we threw a wrench here, but
I'm fine with that. I'd like to have a conversation about what that really means. And then if we decide that's where we're going to go, we go that direction. We make it the core. I just want to have that conversation.
One
I
concern I would have is that, sorry,
No, go ahead.
would be that we are not just looking at middle school, because to get kids to that place in 8th grade, it is impossible if we don't set them up
100%
properly in
agree.
elementary school.
100% agree.
So if we as a board are going to set that goal, that it's common curriculum, we need to be sure that we don't do that in 26, 27, because we won't have enough time to prepare those kids by 8th grade, because that has to happen in elementary school.
Yeah,
Most
we would
kids
need to
won't
start
get there.
accelerating it all the way
So
through.
we have to make sure that when we talk about that as a board and we give that directive, that we have enough time to get there. That isn't the thing they start in 6th grade.
I think there's a common theme here because we've been talking for a while now about attacking the root cause of why we're seeing the fruit that is born later on in their educational experience. And I would agree with them that I think that we've kind of established that is one of the root cause challenges for students who are behind the ball when it is assessment time. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
And this is just a nit, I think, but just to clarify, so the SAT, we're gonna use the super score, but that's, I guess I'm trying, maybe my question is more, what data set are we looking at for that number? Because we
For the
only,
1080.
for the SAT score.
Yeah, for the
For
1080.
even going forward, are we taking the junior year test?
We are taking the,
For the 10, I guess I'm asked, is the 1080, I think,
is the
I
1080.
agree that we need both of those measures, and I think they're different.
it is 1080 and how it's in the strategic plan is by the end of their time with us. By the end of their senior year, we have to be able to account for that. So we're going to grab the juniors who've taken it, who've hit the 1080, and those who are above, and those who retake it, because we have a lot of students who continue to retake those assessments.
How are you gonna get that though? Do we get all
We
of the,
do.
Yeah, we
all
do.
of
We
it,
do.
even if they sign up
We
on their
do.
own?
Yep, we get
We
every
do.
score
We
that
get
they
because
take.
as long as they hit what school even when they sign up on their own,
Okay,
they select east or north,
Okay.
so that's part of it, that we collect all of that data back to us.
okay.
And again, we can bring you back the why behind the 1080, but I want to go back to where we started here. Yes, on the quartile data, it's going to be it's going to be a lot of that when you're going to see, we're not going to show you, yes, we have attendance, at 85. We're going to also say, well, here are some of the areas that we have weaknesses in. We have the 95%, but again, we should also be asking, why don't we have 96%? Why don't we have 97%? What are we doing for those other percents? So Mr. Lackner, to your question, absolutely. We'll break that down. So we're not just giving you a hard 1080. Yes, there you go. We're done. But we break that piece down to say, look at where
What are
we have a span of our students and how are they performing, and a percent of students who are at that 11, 1200, and other students who are in that 900. And what are we doing there? So the board will see that. They'll see the overall success indicators, because we'll give you that first. Here are these 6. What is the percentage of students who are meeting all 6? And then we'll break it down in each of those categories. So the board sees this kind of this bigger picture of how are we doing and where do kids fall in the range? Because as your point's a really good one. Average is average. But where's everybody else? Because there's not one average kid. So how does that all fall out? So it'll be a very dynamic way of looking at how are we doing in our organization overall.
Okay, I have a question that kind of goes to the other end of this.
Okay.
So we've talked about what we're going to do before they take the test, and I know we've heard quite a bit about the B average and the correlation for success indicators. Most of those success, or a couple of those success indicators being standardized test data and college persistence. What I'd like to see as we move forward, and I think we've already done a kind of a correlation for D303 along with the national. So as we move forward, I'd like to see kind of a deep look into that data, just to say, is that continuing for the future correlation, the future college persistence, starting from this date forward, the cohorts that
I
we
see
have
what you're saying.
moving forward. So- and
That'll be a
that's-
part of the student achievement report every year.
Yeah.
Right? It's always a year in the rear though, right? But we'll
Right.
have data all the way through 6 years out.
Yeah, and what I want is a kind of that specific correlation to that B average and those success indicators, because that I think will help allay some of the concerns we have about grade inflation, that if those success indicators continue to hold going forward, then I think I
think it's a
think
good
everybody's
point.
satisfied.
I think it's a good point, but yes, we'll have that within that we get that report around the retention, the success of our students annually, but it's always in their ear.
One last quick question regarding success indicators, and what you just said, Paul, made me think of it. So you were going to present what percent of students are meeting all 6 of those success indicators. Is there an ideal percentage that we're hoping will meet all 6? Is there a benchmark that we'll be measuring against? 60% of students are meeting all success indicators. What are we shooting for?
So that's where we'll bring in September that benchmark. Here's where we're at. And from there, that's where we want to consistently see growth. We want to see growth in these areas. And it's all the things that Christine and I just talked about, how we're going to create that growth opportunity. So that September will be that first opportunity for us to pull all the data to be able to say, okay, this is that benchmark, and we want to see growth. And then again, I can correlate it back to everything we talked about, is that work we're going to do to grow it.
And I think the other piece, and if this isn't the question you're asking, I apologize, but the research would say not that a kid has to hit all 6 of them, but they
Correct.
need to hit 4 out of 6.
Mhm.
So like, that's what we're going to be, is that what you're asking?
And that's kind of what I was
Yeah.
curious about. It is, 66% of the success
Correct.
indicators means a student's going to be on track to be
Yeah, if
successful.
they
And-
have 4 of these 6, then we
Right.
see this results.
So we could perhaps have a data representation of who's meeting all 6 and who's meeting the ideal
Yeah.
minimum threshold
Correct.
that would indicate
Yeah,
that. they'd be a
absolutely.
successful
Yeah. Once
student.
the data will be in such a way that we can splice it and move it to do all those things.
Great.
And are
Thank you.
they all equally weighted?
They are.
Yeah.
In this one, they are. There's not one that outweighs the other. And it was interesting in the research. The research also points that out. When we saw that the attendance wasn't there, it's a natural correlation to the other 2 that were seeing a significant drop off. I'm going to go into, I believe this was a Ms. McCabe question. What are the roles and responsibility of the board in the strategic plan? The biggest one is exactly what you're doing right now. It's the governance. It's asking the questions. It's pushing the administration to ensure that are we getting the best and how are we doing that? But it's that constant monitoring for some of those indicators. It's going to be on a monthly basis. Other ones, it's going to be quarterly based off of the data we're providing to the board. So grades will be quarterly at the 6-8. Semesters for our high school students. Monthly will be the attendance, the belonging data. Trimesters will be the ELA math proficiencies, the iReady scores. So we're going to have a consistent update at the board table around these different success indicators as they keep coming into us. So it's a lot more dynamic than we've seen in the past, where again, it's maybe one shot wonder somewhere in November, that we come to the board. So you'll see that on a continuous basis around those pieces. But again, that role of the board really is that high level governance and monitoring of where we're at and what we're doing. Again, that's also connecting the work we're doing in our organization to the strategic plan, that the board's doing that as well, that they see those connections. Going forward, one of the pieces that we will also be presenting in future conversations are things that potentially we'll stop doing based off of the strategic plan, and really seeing that opportunity to do things differently in our organization. Because one of the things I think we do a horrible job in education, we just keep adding on. We don't do a good job of pulling back. So that's one of those pieces when we come to the board, we're saying, okay, based off the strategic plan and where we're at, this would be a recommendation that we discontinue. So that's some work that cabinet principals and others are getting ready to engage in as well. But you'll see that kind of governance being brought to the board.
If I could just
Please.
just make one suggestion in terms of presentation related to the updates on the success indicators. I think especially initially, as everyone is getting comfortable
Mhm.
with the plan and the indicators, that they're constantly presented and tied. So when you're presenting on ELA math proficiency, don't just say you're presenting on that, but also say, this is directly related to the strategic plan. This is one of our six. So,
Love it.
so the connections are always made
Absolutely.
almost redundantly.
Yeah, I think, a good model of that is what Christine has been doing. Every time she presents, she shows you the commitment statement, the strategic priorities, the values, and how they directly connect. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
We will continue to do that, because these are all different ways to make sure that this is a living, breathing document, and it doesn't just sit over in the corner. And this is how you do it. So I appreciate that push.
I think not only will that help me as a board member, and I'm sure other board members, but for me it will, as well as the community. I think that lays it out really nicely and very cleanly to have it tied in to with, what part of the strategic plan we're talking about
Yeah.
each time something like that is brought up, because then, to your point, it becomes something we don't just, hey, this is so pretty on the shelf.
It looks nice.
So I really, really appreciate that. If that's the way it's laid out, it'll be very helpful for me.
And just to repeat what Dr. Gordon said, at every presentation, they show us what policy number it aligns to, as well as now the strategic plan. So continuing that, and maybe even more finely grained to
Yeah.
it will make it clear to the community.
You'll also see the piece that Christine's doing a really nice job as well on those strategic priorities, but also the specific outcomes that we're achieving, that we're really going for, to that granular level that you're talking about, Ms. McCabe. Like, no, let's drill down to exactly where we're going on this and why we're doing it. So I appreciate that. I believe this was a Mr. Kushert question regarding kind of that whole overall community voice. How did we gather people's input, the feedback in that? Again, within the document, in the hyperlink, there's one link in there that kind of shows all the different communication on this, which is pretty significant. That learning, teaching, the communications department, myself and others really had a lot of communication out to our community as well. But it was also connecting with our staff, getting feedback. We had roughly over 1,000 staff members in 2 different surveys give us feedback on the overall plan, supportive of the plan, gave us feedback on the success indicators, as we had talked about at another board meeting. Like, how are you going to monitor these? How are you going to do those pieces? Very similar to where the board conversation is at. We also had sent out to our community, roughly 470 people responded to that. Interesting. They had support for the plan, but very similarly, how are you going to do this? How is this going to manifest itself? This is lovely, but how are you going to make this operational? And that's really where our action plans come in. That was showed the board last time. We're finalizing all those. Once this is finalized, we will finalize our action steps, and that will be a front-facing part of our when we launch it in August. Scott and his team in communications, they're working on kind of the pretty version of this. So it's easy to read, understand, and then see what are those action steps when it comes under each one of those strategic priorities and those outcomes. Every one of those pieces have action steps. Within that, it's a prioritization. We can't do everything. This is a 5-year plan. The moment we start trying to do everything, we're going to be tripping, stumbling over ourselves. And that's the last thing we want to do. We want to keep having the focus that we've had this year and seeing some of those early results, early wins that our educators are seeing across our organization. So that was a big piece where our community was giving us feedback was, again, we like it consistently. I don't care where we asked the question. The B average was continued to be the bugaboo, literally from strategic plan team to the board to staff to community. That was one of those big concerns. But yeah, we've tried to engage different people to get feedback on our plan from our school leaders as well, our principals, our directors. So I feel like it's a comprehensive opportunity for people to give us their feedback and for us to take that in, consider it, and try to bring forward the best plan possible.
Is it possible your listen, learn, and return were very successful? I hate to even say this out loud. Is there any chance that you could figure out a way to do it more again with the strategic plan, knowing that in the next 2 years, we are going to hear from a lot of community.
Correct.
I think it's real important that we push into the community before they push on us, because they're going to push on us. So if there's, you bring to this community your expertise, your relationship building, your positive energy. This might be another opportunity for you to share. This is an incredible document. This is a lot of hard work. It's such a complex, education is just so complex.
It is.
But for our families, it's 1 or 2 or 3 people who count the most. And it's those kiddos that they send to us. So if there's a way to build that communication, we don't have CAC anymore to have that feedback.
We absolutely will, but it kind of goes to a point Mr. Lenz has made a couple times is how do we communicate this out? How do we share this? How do we document it? How do people know? I know a big one for him has been around. How do we let people know what our priority standards are in each grade level? This is a piece that he and I spoke about just the other day in my office. Like it's really important that a 3rd grade parent know what are those priority standards in math, in literacy. So they're able to also advocate for themselves. Like, oh, this is what my daughter should know by the end of 3rd grade, and making sure that is easily accessible, because sometimes district websites can be a little challenging, not ours, but other people's websites are a little challenging. But I think to your other point, one of the critical feedbacks we had during our listen, learn, in the return piece was, hey, I love that you came out and talked about facilities. I want to talk about academics. And that was a piece that with kind of the year, that's a piece that we need to get back out there and really talking about our academics and what we're doing. And it gave me, and quite honestly, Christine and our team, a year to put under our belt to say, okay, what are we actually doing? I think we're going to have a better conversation with our parents and our community on that, but also layering it in with the strategic plan. So yeah, you have my commitment that we are going to do that. And that was the critical feedback to us in some of the return sessions, especially on the facilities. Like, this is fantastic. I want to hear about what you're doing with academics, and we will make that shift. Mr. Lentz, I knew you were.
I was actually going to take it back to our first item for our cultural competence. So I read the framework here, the respectful and affirming environments. Do we have the distribution of our staff from their evaluations today on where we're at? You know, who's distinguished, who's unsatisfactory? What's the curve, right? Without putting the individual teachers out
Yeah.
there, right? Because if we're going to use this as a benchmark for where we're at, I would like to see where we're at from a baseline perspective. And the other piece on this, as I read the actual text here, so students, this is the distinguished evaluation.
Mhm.
Students have helped create a unique identity for their class that celebrates each individual's racial and cultural identity, honors diversity, and acknowledges and addresses racial and cultural dynamics at play in the environment. One of the pieces of feedback that I got a lot from our community was the concern about how much we are bringing cultural and other differences and conflict into the classroom.
Mhm.
And my concern is we want to focus on our academics in the classroom. What additional burdens are we placing on our teachers as they're going through this, as they have to, address this to get a distinguished mark, right?
So one, I just want to make sure clear, the state gives us two choices. The Danielson or the Marzano framework. Those are the two that yeah, and you're going to see almost identical across the board. And this is also across the United States. We had Danielson in Colorado. We had Danielson in Washington. Danielson is probably, I would say it's probably over 50% of school districts use the Danielson framework. So we use that. But to your point, what does that look like in a classroom? How does that, for us, it's creating that sense of community that each student is seen, valued, and cared for, because we know without a doubt that when kids do feel safe academically, safe emotionally, their academics are going to improve because of that. That's really where we want our classrooms to be. And we, in respecting the unique differences in each kid that they bring, each one of us bring our own unique experiences into those classrooms. And that's really where we want to be spending some of that time. There's always going to be, that's time well spent within our classrooms to get to the academic pieces, which is the vast majority of our time. The vast majority of our time is there, but you really do need to make sure that each kid feels really good about raising their hand to put out their thinking on a math problem that they know very well may be incorrect, but I need to be able to have that safety in that classroom.
We don't want our teachers to belittle or make them scared, right, to raise their hands, which is kind of why I'm wondering, just from a district level, like what our distribution is, right? It makes sense. I wasn't aware that there's only two frameworks that we can choose from, and they're likely fairly similar, right? But where are we at today? If we can get that, and I think that would be something to include in the benchmark of like what's.
I wouldn't want to put teacher evaluations in our benchmarks, because as I look at our success indicators and I look at our strategic priorities, everything feeds into those overarching success indicators. When we do this stuff really well within those success indicators, that's the indicator the board should be most. Those are the indicators that the board really needs to be paying attention to. On the individuals, and I know you're not asking for individual teacher evaluations, I know that. I don't know if that's going to give you the information you need, because we want, at the end of the day, highly competent staff members who are creating let me just go back, making sure that we're hitting these success indicators. Those are levers to get to here. That's a quicker way of saying it. All these pieces are different levers to get us here. That's what I want to be monitoring. All right, let me look at any other question, because there was 5 kind of big overarching ones. I think I got the big ones that we left June 12th with. So any other questions overall?
I just wanted to add to what Mr. Lentz was talking about. And I think that the way I put it to you in our conversation was, if I walked into a classroom to watch a teacher and I was standing in the back and I couldn't see the faces of any of the students, I wouldn't want to know, I wouldn't want to even be able to make a guess at the demographics of the classroom, because I want them all being taught the same. And I'm hoping that's what our goal is ultimately.
Mr. Kuchert and I went to watch a math lesson in fourth grade, I think it was, third grade. And I can tell you that that teacher, it had made it so safe that the students would give the wrong answer and other students would say, it's okay. That way, and children were able to express themselves. I changed my mind on the way I answered that. It was really concrete. And I think when we start to move into which teachers are distinguished and which teachers are proficient, we're going to change the culture of this whole process. Because then it sounds like the board only cares about teachers who hit the highest level in an evaluation. And I don't think there's an educator around who would tell you that the way teachers are evaluated by the state is where they grow. They grow through their PLCs. And they need to get the feedback, but the feedback should come from the colleagues who are sitting there and pushing them and talking to them about students. To put the percentage of distinguished teachers based on the Danielson will just mean that we are going to try to make more teachers distinguished from that scale.
I think, let me clarify my ask, this is more of a snapshot in time that I'm looking to see. Like if we're charging Paul and the team, right, with making changes and evaluating and moving our progress, right? Is this an area that we need to do a lot of work in? Is this an area where we need to be driving, perhaps additional dollars for recruitment or other things, right? If this is a significant challenge for us right now, I'm in a little bit of an information deficit as far as, is this an issue, right? It's been called out by the team as part of like, hey, we want this as part of the strategic plan. So it's telling me that that's important to the team that they put that out there. I had an initial concern. Paul's alleviated that. My other concern then would be on how we're actually doing in the classroom today, right? We hear about, some of the bullying and other things and where our teachers are at. That cultural thing may be a piece of it as well. It's just more of a snapshot, Mrs. McCabe, that as opposed to, and that's, I think that's where I need to rephrase it. That maybe not as part of the ongoing, but Paul, is this, where are we at?
I hear you now. Thank you for that clarification. I think the other piece that will really show up here, and I probably said it last time, was in this student sense of belonging. Again, how we pull that data apart will be really critical to understand. Where do our kids feel like they're connecting to do they have an adult? Do they have those pieces? And that's something that we're going to do more of a pulse survey on those. Those are going to be much shorter questions for our students. We're talking 5 to maybe 9 questions, but that's going to be on an ongoing basis. So we can start seeing those pieces and start being more intentional again. Where are we seeing some of those gaps? Because if that data, the research behind that belonging is so clear, we need to clean those pieces up. But I hear what you're saying there, but thank you for reiterating that. Other questions?
I have one that, we talked a lot about, let me start with this, my experience and my observations of teachers across D303 is that they work really hard to differentiate within their classroom to really meet the needs of the range of students that they face all the time. And it's hard work to do so. I also see a lot in the strategic plan that talks about common standards, priority standards, collaboration around efficacy of what will work, the adoption of a guaranteed and viable curriculum that is consistent from building to building and classroom to classroom. There's a lot of that reflected in the strategic plan, and I think that's really valuable. At the same time, there's a lot of, there's some commentary in the strategic plan about the need to meet every student, to do things for every student. That's over 11,000 students. There are phrases like unique and multiple pathways and individual all in the same place on the same slide. When I see those two concepts next to each other, I hear some conflict because the district has neither the resources nor does any individual teacher have the resources in a classroom to treat every individual student's unique conditions and situations uniquely. And so when I look at things like the need to rally around viable and guaranteed curriculum, I see commonality and I see the concentration of resources around things that work. When I hear these words like unique and multiple pathways, it is without argument impossible to have over 11,000 programs, unique programs. We can't invest in it. We can't support it. Teachers can't deliver it. And so one of the challenges that I bring back to the team as we think about implementation is there is a check on the plan when it comes to the balance between the creation of excellent programs around which teachers and admin and the board can rally. And there's a control point for that here at the board table, and that's the purse strings. I would challenge the team to think long and hard about what's the range of programs and the variety of programs and the number of programs around which the district can be excellent versus the concept of we will treat every individual student uniquely. Of course we will. They're all individuals who are unique and we'll have unique conversations with them. The program and the content investments have limits. And so I just challenge the team to think about the implementation levers that we have, which are programmatic, which are the implementation of PLCs, which are the delivery of common program with individual variation, but not individual programs that become common. And so it's reflected in the plan. And as I watched the meeting from the 12th while missing the interplay, it's one of the issues that came up in part through some of the Q&A, but even in our discussion today, you know, we're centering on results measures that drive common results. And so I just caution the team to think about the implementation levers, which is program excellence, which is collaboration through those PLCs, but it is not an infinite number of programs. In fact, the total volume of programs is governed not only by that check here, but by the check of what is consumable by the educators in the district. And that's going to be another practicality check. So it's not really a question. I just throw that out there as a point of conversation.
No, I think it's a good conversation. We're going to be bringing the program cost, all the, you know, the different programs that we've talked about that the board said, yes, these are the ones we want you to look at. So we're going to have that. Getting my months, July, it's coming up that we'll have those kind of those dollars and cents of programs across our organization. That is not going to include, and the board agreed, like our special ed education program, but all other programming. So we can have that bigger sense of where are we at? What are we doing with that, with the kind of conversation around pathways. And I would concur with you that we are creating a lot more consistency in our organization, a lot more structures around those pieces where I see a lot of that individual piece. What I talk about is if we can get our elementary students with an incredible foundation, and that means where there are students are working at and participating in grade level standards and assignments and instruction on a consistent basis, we are still going to have some students who are going to fall behind, but we're going to have more levers to pull there to support them back up to the norm, the core classroom. To me, that's where we're at, that we're doing more of our work within our core classroom because we have an absolute standard of what we expect going forward. If we can do that, then moving into that middle school, then there are a few more options, explore options for our students to expand into. But where it really explodes and is really great pathways for kids is at our high schools, where that we have multiple AP courses. I think we have got 31 unique AP courses at East and 25, 26 at North. We have different programs there. Those are those pieces that I think if we can do a really great job with our foundational work, that's where I see those types of pathways starting to come into play, where students are saying, I want to focus on computer science. I want to focus in these areas. And more importantly, and this is something Thomas and I talked about, is that I have the critical thinking skills to be able to do that work. That's the game changer for kids, is that we have to have that foundational piece in place. And I think that's where we have that inconsistency within our district right now, where some kids can, but not everyone can have that type of critical thinking experience. And that's really that for me, that's the differentiator for our students around the programs they're able to choose and go into. But I appreciate it, and we'll be coming back in July, August with that. I can't remember the date. Other questions?
One from me, and I'm not quite sure if you specifically covered it or not. With regards to listen, learn, return, and the no longer existence of the CAC, what is your plan for that going forward? Because I want to make sure as a board, we are making sure that the community has avenues.
Yeah, absolutely.
For us to listen
We
at large,
will
other
have
than
that.
microphone.
Tonight, I don't have it right in front of me tonight, but absolutely, you have my commitment. It's been my commitment all along that I'm always inside our community and out. But sitting here tonight, I don't have that sketched out for you.
So something, I know you're saying you don't have a clear picture of that, but are you suggesting it's something different than listen, learn, return, or more listen, learn, returns with different topics? I just want to make sure I know.
Probably more along those lines.
Okay,
Along.
I'm not going to hold you to those words
Yeah.
specifically.
I'm like,
I
oh
just-
boy.
Yeah, well,
I know
you're
what you're
saying it's
saying, though.
not clear, but I wanted to make sure I have a grasp
It's
of
more
what you're
listen,
saying.
learn, return type.
Something like that.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other conversation? Questions? Thoughts? Then, Matt, I think we can move this for tomorrow's special meeting. We're good to go. So it's
Do
on
we
the
have
agenda.
consensus? Is it ready to move forward?
I think that just to be clear, was my understanding the chairs of the committee. So that was why I asked him. I just want to be clear. They decide, but we can get a consensus.
Yes, it's absolutely your call, but at the end of the day, if you don't have people that are ready, then we can take it forward again.
I'm all right. I'm fine asking again if there are any other comments or questions. If you're ready to move forward, then we'll move it forward.
I'm ready.
I'm getting shrugs. Okay.
Yep.
Matt saying yes. All right, then we'll move it to tomorrow's meeting. All right, next on the agenda is our ALOP compass conversation. So I will turn it over to Dr. Gordon.
Okay, again, following back up with our ALOP compass conversation, where are we at? We had really good conversation. We've had a number of really good conversations. We've had some questions, trying to get those back out to the board as well in a board report, along with updating the FAQ document. I think some of the pieces that the board was specifically, asking about again, for us, where we're heading as an organization in D303, Compass will be an ALOP program moving forward in that 24-25 school year. We still have some students who will be grandfathered in under that piece, but going forward, it is strictly an ALOP program. Just as a reminder, these are those criteria for the ALOP program, with chronic absenteeism, substance abuse, social, emotional, or behavioral concerns, difficulty reintegrating into the school environment following a homebound, lack of sufficient high school credit. So those are those pieces where we're at and where we're committed to being. The other piece that we're committed to is ensuring that, just like we have conversations at our high schools and every other place within our organization, that we have really tight teacher to student ratios across our organization. Currently, the district spends out of their general funds roughly $800,000, give or take, where we need to be is closer to that $300,000. So having some conversations about what does that look like, sound like, and feel like, that's been a consistent theme of the board, that we really look at those dollars being spent because, and I think the why the board's asking it, they're asking it across our organization. And for us to be consistent, no matter what program, no matter what school, no matter what we're doing, we have to look at those pieces and make sure that we're being as cost effective as possible in those areas. The success criteria. This was a question. Yeah, please. I was going to hand this one over.
Yeah, that just is related to when we write our ALOP grant, we have identified, these are the three things that we identified in terms of our success criteria. They're directly related to that definition of ALOP services. You can see it's about earning credit, it's about absences, and it's about increasing the time spent engaged with a learning environment and developing really that self-awareness and self-management skills.
Dr. Igo and Sharon, talk a little bit about, again, the competencies. Again, there's a question on, are each of our courses at Compass, at that state expectation? Also speak a little bit about what the waiver does and what it allows you to do. So Dr. Igo first, and then.
Yeah, so first, it is absolutely the competencies and the road towards graduation are absolutely aligned with the ISB requirements as well as our board policy. The waiver that we have has to do with how a credit is defined within the school code. So within the school code, the credit is really assigned based upon seat time as well as the course or the grade that you earn in the course. And what the waiver does is it allows us to think differently. Instead of saying you have to attend and be in a class for a semester to earn credit, it's just that you need to be able to show us that you can demonstrate proficiency on that. And then for each of the courses with which kids need for graduation, those competencies are aligned. And what we've done is we've taken the seat time out of it and focused in on the demonstration of mastery.
Sharon, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that the reason that really supports students who qualify for ALOP is that they can have additional time if they need it. There's not a penalty for that. So, right now, if they don't meet competency or in a traditional setting, if they don't get a passing grade, which is a lower standard than meeting competency, I know you've heard that, but if they don't get that by the end of the semester, they fail and they don't have an opportunity to regain that. They have to retake the whole course. But with competency-based, if students need that additional time, there's not a penalty. They can have that additional time. We have it built into our schedule where they can stay for an additional block, work with the teacher, develop a plan, and then continue to do the work to demonstrate that mastery or proficiency and earn the credit. So it doesn't matter if a student takes a year or a quarter, if they can demonstrate mastery of those standards, they can earn the credit. So it really benefits students who might need that additional time in a way that a comprehensive, the traditional model doesn't.
I think the other way to think about that too is it means kids don't have to start over. So if they started to show like they've made some progress towards the proficiency, in a traditional program, they have to go back and start over because they have to do the whole entire course again. This allows them to pick up where they're at and continue to grow.
Can you remind us who develops the competencies that are aligned with the high school credit? So as we're awarding the high school credit, how do we develop those competencies?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we, if you remember, I talked about, we worked with Rose Colby, who is an expert in competency-based education. She has written multiple books and works as a consultant with lots of school districts across the country. So she worked with us to help develop the competencies. And what we did was we looked at the standards, the, Common Core standards, and we then worked through kind of like the priority standard work that's happening. What is essential here? How do the rest of the standards support that? And that helped us to develop our performance indicators, which are similar to what the work that's being done with the proficiency scales. So that was the general work, but then we worked with the then assistant superintendent and director that were here before that helped with that, assistant superintendent of curriculum or instruction, Denise Herman, and then Melissa Byrne. So that was how we did that.
But at the core of it are the state
Yes.
standards.
Every
And
single
each of
one of
their-
every single one of the competencies has language from the standards and is aligned with each standard. So the idea of competency-based is that you have those overarching transferable skills that no matter what subject you're working in, you're demonstrating those, right? So for writing, it's not just in English class, you're demonstrating that in science when you write lab reports, you're demonstrating that in social studies when you do a presentation. So those are overarching, right? But all of them are aligned with the ELA standards, the science standards, the social studies standards, and the language is taken directly from them.
And
Does
can-
that answer?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Can you also remind us where we can view that? So if the public wants to take a look at where the alignment between the standards and the competencies, I believe last time you said it was embedded on the website, but I just want to double check.
Yes, yeah, it is in the website. And I can work with the communications department to make it more, make it more easily visible so that people can just click right on it instead of having to like go into a couple different pages to get to it.
But it's on the.
But it is on the website. It's on the Compass website.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was able to review some of that. There's like, I think a 36-page document or something that becomes a little cumbersome to look through. So yeah, if that could be readily available, I think that will answer a lot of questions.
Yes.
Will we have to reapply for a waiver at the end of this waiver?
Yes, so the waiver is good for 5 years, so we'll reapply. I can't think, is it the 26, 27 or 27? 25, I can't remember
25,
where we are in
26.
the waiver process,
Yeah.
but yes, we need to reapply.
Yes.
And we move from being in the beginning stages to the intermediate stages, so there's a different kind of set of things that we need to do.
So will we have to, just based on the process, will we always have to have a waiver for Compass
Yes.
going forward, just because it's?
In order to continue with a competency-based model, we will need a waiver
Okay.
based upon how the school code's written.
Is this something from our lobbying efforts or anything like that? If we see this as a valuable thing, is this something that we should press the ISB folks or anything like that for?
One of the the large unit district association prior to me being here, competency based was a major push for them at the state level. So the state is very well aware of some of the larger districts in the state really trying to push more towards this type of assessment from like Huntley School District is probably one of those school districts that leads the way in this area, but there's a number of others who continue to push that. Was that the question? Did
I guess
Kinda.
what I'm but what I'm getting at is this a large administrative burden for us to go for a
Oh,
waiver?
gosh,
And
no.
okay,
No. I feel like the state's done a really nice job of allowing us to do the waiver process and acknowledging that this is a way to go, but it is not a cumbersome process.
got it. Okay, yeah, because again, if we're saying that this is going to be what we're going to do exclusively for the ALOP to expand our services there and focus it, again, just making this as the regular motion, what does that entail for us? And then what additional rigor will we have to do to make sure that, we are further making it, close to the standards or
I don't think all of the competencies are aligned with the standards already. And in order for students to demonstrate competency, they have to meet a threshold that demonstrates proficiency. So that is, they're already aligned, but with this work that we're doing through the PLCs, we have PLCs at Compass as well. So we will be aligned through that work as well. So some of the work that my staff is doing this summer is looking at the we've done with our competencies, looking at the priority standards once we have that information available, and then making sure
everything is lockstep aligned. And then looking through our performance indicators along with the proficiency scales and making sure that that aligns as well. But going back to what I said from the beginning, this was all aligned with the standards to start. And some of the performance indicators, all of that language is taken directly from the standards, just breaks down what the skills are that the kids have to do.
I wanted to also correct me if I'm wrong, but competency in Compass is relative or I don't know that it's equal exactly, but they have to have basically a B. And so competency is a B, which aligns directly to the strategic plan, correct?
Yeah, the closest we can explain it would be that, because for writing there, if a student writes an essay and they don't meet each of the performance indicators, each one within the that particular competency, they have to resubmit it. The teacher will give them feedback, they revise. It's a process. So no student ever gets an essay that meets competency. And this is just one example. Obviously, an essay is we could have this for any class, but no student meets competency for that whole piece of writing until each one of those performance indicators is met, which is very different from a standard in a traditional classroom where they give points on the rubric, and as long as it equals a passing grade of a 60%, which they might not be meeting for some of those performance indicators, they wouldn't be if they got a 60, they would get credit. But at Compass, they don't get credit till they get to that level, which if you had a rubric of 1, 2, 3, and 4, they'd at least have to get to a 3 for everything to be meeting. Does that answer what you were saying, Kate? Does that clear that?
I think so. What I had understood is that
Yes.
from the students that I know, they have expressed to me, while the environment is completely different, the classwork and the rigor is harder, and they are willing, and it's easier for them to put the effort forward because of the actual environment. So I wanted to make sure that I was actually hearing that right, because you never know when it comes from a student, not that they don't have the right information, but that to me was a pretty loud statement, in that it made a big impact on me, that these, to your point, you just said, and East and North, they might get a C or a D and pass. Whereas Compass, if it's not a B, that's a very high standard, which I'm really excited about that.
Just to add to that, and just to hopefully clarify for anyone who might still have a question about that, part of what we're trying to do for all of our students is address those other skills, those employability skills. Those people use lots of different words, but they align with social emotional learning, perseverance, self-management, et cetera, right? So our students, when they submit something, you're right that there are students who initially, when they have arrived at Compass, they have been some of them have been challenged in a way that made them confused, because they've been like, well, I turned it in. I did this. I did that essay. Why do I have to do it again? And they've had to work through that, but that actually has helped them develop some of those other skills, which will help them to be successful across the board. And that's the goal, right? We're trying to develop the whole student. But yes, that certainly is. I've had many conversations about why students need to make revisions to be able to meet competency. It's part of the model, though.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, regarding the standards, I would like to kind of the same thing that we talked about with the other schools, and that I'd like to see future correlation, the college attendance, college persistence, career persistence, to know that this program is performing and doing the things that we want it to do.
Absolutely. And just so you know, we did put that information in that frequently asked question doc, at least for the last 2 classes. So
Yeah,
that
and
you can see-
I'm looking kind of going for
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
going
I just
forward
wanted to make
cohorts.
sure that you knew that we
Yeah.
did pull that information.
And then the other is regards the cost. What is, and I know we kind of touched on it yesterday, but I'm not 100% clear. What is the cost comparison going forward from kind of where we're at to where we're going to be? as far as the cost of the program? It sounds like we're going to be reducing costs in some ways.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the general funds that are added to Compass. That will be the piece that we're looking at, as like I said, as we've committed across our organization, that we're going to be a tighter organization on that. Currently, don't quote me on the number, it's roughly 700,000, 750,000.
I'm talking about the money outside ALOP funds.
Yeah,
Like,
that's so we're
yeah.
talking roughly the district puts in that additional dollars. So we want to bring that back down to closer to that 300,000. And again, having those conversations like we're having across our organization. How are we more fiscally responsible within our each and every one of our programs in our districts? So yes, you have that commitment from me.
Can I
Okay, and
do a
that-
go ahead first.
I just to kind of follow up on that. So is that going to be accomplished? How do we anticipate that? It is as a result of, in part, I'm going to guess, fewer students.
That over time, absolutely, that would be part of it. But we'll look like we did at our schools, K-12, that student to teacher ratio. It's a piece that we've been doing within our organization since we've been here, and that we're committed to doing that work.
So I guess another follow-up on that, because that was a similar question that I had. So based just again, raw numbers that we've been putting out there. So are we saying then for the next draft of the budget that's coming in July, that we're going to see like it based on the math, 800 and the 3, that it'll be about 1.1 million for this program in the budget?
For this program, for this going forward, yes, we've committed to our staff, we've committed to everybody going forward. I'm talking about
for the draft budget
24,
that's coming in
25,
July.
no, because that our staff's been hired, everything has been set for next year.
Changes would be 24, 25 as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Changes are 24, 25.
But our budget though is split.
Yeah.
The budget covers half of 1 year and half of the
Sure.
school year. So we should still see it closer to 1.1. I appreciate what you're saying.
I hear what you're saying as well. So I'll work with Justin on that piece of it to
Okay.
make sure that aspect is reflected. I hear what you're saying now.
Okay.
I don't, is there any other questions? Because before I go again, okay. Just a question on, we answered, I think, about the insufficiency of physical space for the lab space for manufacturing, engineering, and the technology equipment, right? And because we're going to be only focusing on ALOP going forward at Compass, are we leaving out an opportunity for students at North and at East for some of this equipment? That is something that, talking with some of the kids of, hey, how do we get access to that? I believe we also heard some citizen comments of people coming in and really, getting really interested in the equipment.
Mhm.
So is that, do we have similar stuff? I know we don't have the full CNC and all the other things, but is that something, Paul, that you guys can look at for next year so that we can get a little bit more equity at North and East as far as the access to this equipment?
It's something that I can look at. As I sit here today, for me to tell you that I know what's in each of the high schools would be
Unacceptable. No.
unacceptable.
Creatively about it. We'll have to think creatively, but yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you, and
Yep.
we'll think about when we have a student like that, what does that mean? And how can we make sure?
Yeah, well,
they can access.
I'm curious at like within our current catalog, right?
Yeah.
Like this is something that I've heard from the community, and again, just looking at the job openings and other things, we're talking about our pathways, right? There are a lot of pathways related to that equipment and related to the capabilities learned in using that in a setting. And I want to make sure that the students at North and at East have access to that same thing.
I hear you.
I do think when you're looking into that, I believe that some of those machines are available through Fox Valley Career Center. I'm not positive, but I think there is some overlap there.
Thank you.
Just to kind of look.
Thank you.
And one thing I wanted to add, I had a random conversation with someone who works at the Regional Office of Education, and they were talking about how the board is reviewing Compass, and they were saying that wanted to know if I was aware that almost all of the schools in Kane County have some version of this, but ours is incredibly strong and unique in the way we do it. So he was just very excited that we happened to bump into each other and, oh, you're so-and-so. And he was talking about just how impressed he was with how great Compass is. So I'm just
Love
throwing that out there, that
Love that.
we are not alone in that almost all the schools in Kane County have this. We just do ours very special
Nice.
and over the
Nice.
top good.
Thank you.
So I'm going to put my heart out. I'm going to be a steward of the taxpayer money and agree that the change in Compass is the direction that D303 needs to do. But I do want to say that I think the intention, though muddled for us as board members, the idea of giving kids who are struggling a support system that's different. It's an alternative to the pathway that most people are used to going. That Compass has shown that it is going in the right direction. I think we haven't been in operation long enough to have all the answers, but I think giving kids feedback and support and looking at different ways of being competent and being able to be successful is something that many school districts are unable to do, and we took a stab at it. I think the other piece that really grabs me as both as a teacher and an administrator, and then as a grandma, is what we heard from parents. That what they counted on was what was happening to their kid right now. And they were worried about the future of tomorrow, not in 4 years. And that there are times in families' lives where decisions about what's good for my kid has to be also helped through the school district. And I heard a lot of parents, as we all did, that this helped their kid thrive. So Sharon, and to all of you, thank you for what you've done for kids. We're making a few changes, but I can back what we have so we can continue to give kids more than just time in front of a computer, but skills for them to be successful as citizens and get jobs. It may look different than what somebody else's kid did, but I think that this is a program that I hope we can continue to look into to give all opportunities and more opportunities to other kids.
I think, oh, go ahead, Ms. Fairner. I think in this, I think Paul and his team, I think the biggest challenge, at least for me as a board member coming in here, was really the lack of rigor around Compass, what Compass was, what services Compass provided. And we've really seen that lack of rigor get very rigorous, right? We now have a profile for the school, just like we do for all, for North and for East. And we've got, a lot more of the things around it. So I think this FAQ is very helpful. It's also, the community coming in and saying some of these things about, what is working there, I think are things that we need to make considerations for our high schools. I think there are things that are part of it that need to be brought into it. But again, I appreciate all of the work. Again, it's unfortunate that it wasn't there at the very beginning, but it's certainly come a distance. So thank you.
Yeah, I would concur. I think it's been a you know, as somebody coming in to D303, I have a deep understanding of Compass where I knew Compass, but I didn't know Compass. But through this quite a very rigorous, I'm going to steal your word, rigorous process that we've gone through of looking at it, exploring it, really understanding it, the work that Sharon and her team, I would echo what you said, Ms. McCabe. Thank you for what you do. But you're right. We've taken a rigorous approach to what is Compass, because I think as we've seen over time, the board members, and as we've had individual conversations or whole group conversations about what Compass is. And I think for us, I think hopefully we're all on the same page as what it is, where we're going, and where we're moving forward. And I think that's a big step forward for the board, for the superintendent, all of us on that same page, and quite honestly, giving clarity to the staff at Compass as to where we're going, and we're not back on this hamster wheel on a regular basis, because that creates a lot of angst and anxiety within the staff that doesn't serve anyone well. So I appreciate that.
Can I ask one more follow-up question? Because we were approved for a waiver by the state, is there any requirement around that we get, that this program get audited by the state at any point in time? Or how did they, do they have any controls?
No, they not that I can double check on that, but
Okay.
my gut tells me, my understanding, I looked through all that and I don't think so. We just come back every 5 years and
Yes.
reapply. We had to show what we're doing and why and how it all connects.
Okay.
And then they give us the approval.
Sharon, same.
Yeah, that's accurate. That just, it's about the application process and that documentation. So when we reapply, we'll have additional documentation. That's, there's not an audit that.
But I think the piece that I think you're maybe asking that, while the waiver doesn't have that, when we apply for ALOP funding
Okay.
every year, when we have to talk through, well, here are the services and the programs that we have in place. Here's whether or not we've made progress towards, and if we haven't made progress, what changes are we going to make to ensure that we're hitting our goals? So every year that continuous improvement cycle is hit in order for us to continue to maintain our ALOP funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can just get a little clarity on the ALOP funding. Depending on what level we're at, does the funding change, or is it the funding is the funding?
The funding is based on the student. So it's based on the FTE, the number of students we have. And so that's what changes.
That's the way I thought it was. I just, the way you had
Oh,
stated
good
it, I
question.
thought there might be some lack of clarity, so.
Student.
Careful not to use the word grant because it's not a grant. It's an application for funding.
Just in that same vein, as we're going through conversations about capacity and lots of and physical capacity consumption for lots of programs. We've talked a little bit about the student mix today in terms of ALOP funding and who's in that funding application and who's not. And I think it behooves us to look back a little bit, even prior to Compass, at what a steady state percentage of students are that tend to qualify. So that as we're thinking about capacity, we're thinking about it in terms of expectations around that ALOP funding. Because if we make physical plant decisions expecting a population of X and that population shifts in either direction, up or down, we could either lose the revenue or have stranded cost in the facility if we have a real population decline. So I think maybe a little bit of a look at even pre-Compass.
Yeah,
And if you say it's always pretty steady, then
It
then we're
actually,
probably
we've
good.
seen a sharp increase with the implementation of Compass. So we've seen kids, because part of the ALOP process is kids have to be willing to do and participate. So you can't assign a student to an alternative learning program. They have to say, yes, I want to do that. So we have seen a sharp increase almost. I actually have those numbers, which I'll happily share with you because we've done ALOP since 2016 and we have each of those numbers. So I'll share them back with you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, are we ready to move this forward? The district is recommending that we approve Compass for ALOP services outside of the comprehensive high schools. Are we ready to move that to the board meeting? Matt? All right, then we will move it forward. Thank you very much for the time spent on this. Our next item is proficiency scales. And Dr. Igo, do I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. So you've heard us talk this evening. We are in the process, and one of our strategic plan or strategic priorities is to have that guaranteed and viable curriculum. Part of that guaranteed and viable curriculum is having a common definition, understanding of what proficiency means. As we've been working towards that, we've also been trying to accelerate our process to make sure that we have that guaranteed and viable curriculum in place. And it's a process that we use through our PLC process. And so we would like to very much purchase some proficiency scales that have been done by Marsano's Resources. They've been extensively researched. They've gone through an 8-phase process. They've been checked to make sure that there is a current and strong alignment back to the standards, as well as to the state assessment to see and make sure all those pieces are there, as well as there's been vertical alignment to make sure that over time you can carry those kind of with you, that the skills are building over time and they're perfectly aligned. But what we liked about these particular scales is that they are also adjustable. So they've taken the time to take those standards, unpack them, put those pieces together. But then they also say, they work with you to say, now, based upon what you've identified as priority, how do we put those scales together for you and in the way that you're going to use them? So this allows us to get a start and kind of accelerate our learning and put that in place. But in order to do that, we would need to purchase. So we would like to bring that purchase forward tomorrow night.
And
Any
your
questions I can answer.
your reasoning for tomorrow is
The July board meeting is not until July 24th. And which would not allow us to access them in a timely enough manner to provide the professional learning that we'd like to provide to our teachers, starting with our administrators the week of July 17th, followed with our teachers the following week.
So my question is this something that's renewable every year then?
It's a one-time purchase.
Okay.
And I did not purchase we are not working on K-5 social studies next year. So I pulled that, but they did say when we're ready to come back for that, we would continue to get this 30% discount. So we'll probably come back for the social studies. But that would be the only piece. This is a one-time purchase.
So let me just to clarify, because I'm trying to picture this in my mind. This is valid until our standards are adjusted, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
when you say our, do you mean Illinois standards are changed?
To me, I would say either one.
Yeah, so if the standards are changed.
Because our leadership team and teachers identified what the priority standards
yes.
are, right? So if those change, if that group decides that they prioritize differently, then that would impact this.
So just to be clear, they will get all of the proficiency scales for all of the standards, and then we'll pick and choose based on what we've prioritized. So if we pick a different one, we'll go back. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Did we vet any other organizations that offer similar services?
We couldn't find anybody that would allow, that one had the rigor behind them, or two allowed or worked with us to help us adjust them. And so, which was why we went in this particular direction.
Okay, then looking around, we'll move it forward for tomorrow's special board meeting. All right, we are at point 3 for adjournment, future agenda items. We I'm sorry, I don't have the date in front of me. We're scheduled to have our
Is it July 24th?
Yeah.
Yes, July 24th. I think I said that for the board meeting, but I think the actual board meeting is the 26th.
I think the 26th is the
Yeah,
board
so I
meeting and
apologize.
L&T is the 24th. And we have scheduled to have our AP.
Yep, our AP audit will be discussed at that time.
And then we talked about bringing back in August a conversation about Algebra 1.
Correct.
Is there anything else that people want to see? All right. Have that, anything else, Matt? Okay, thank you all. The time is 6:46 and I call the meeting in adjournment. Thanks.